Before you hit subscribe, just know, this story might make you check your locks tonight. The night was quiet, too quiet for San Francisco. The fog had rolled in heavy from the bay, blurring streetlights into orbs of dim yellow haze. At 10:15 p.m. on October 11, 1969, the radio crackled in a police cruiser parked on Presidio Heights. A voice broke through the static. Units in the vicinity, respond to a possible shooting. Washington and Cherry. Suspect described as a white male, approximately 35 to 45, stocky build. Within minutes, officers Donald Fouke and Eric Zelms were speeding through the silent streets. They didn't know it yet, but they were chasing a man who would soon become America's most chilling ghost, a killer who named himself Zodiac. The scene was chaos wrapped in silence. In the front seat of a blood-streaked cab lay Paul Stine, a respected local driver, his glasses still on his face. One clean gunshot wound behind the right ear. His head tilted toward the passenger side, like he had turned, maybe to ask a question, right before death answered. The cab smelled of copper and gunpowder. Police lights splashed red across the concrete. A bloody handprint marked the door handle. Detective Bill Armstrong, one of the first investigators on scene, muttered under his breath, execution style. No robbery. Just deliberate. Then came the strangest detail of all. The killer had taken a piece of Stine's shirt. A small square patch torn with surgical precision. The purpose? Unknown. But within days, the answer would arrive in the form of a letter that would haunt the entire Bay Area. 3 days later, the San Francisco Chronicle newsroom buzzed like a beehive of cigarette smoke and suspicion. Editor Paul Avery stood over a pile of envelopes, one of which had no return address. Its handwriting was bizarre, blocky, uneven, almost playful. Inside was a letter beginning with the words, "This is the Zodiac speaking." Attached to the letter was a piece of blood-stained cloth, the missing patch from Paul Stine's shirt. In one motion, the letter transformed a local homicide into a national obsession. The killer wasn't hiding. He was performing. Detectives and journalists studied every inch of the letter. It included details only the killer could know, the caliber of the weapon, the pattern of the crime scene, and a chilling admission that this was number 7. Then came a cryptic promise. "I shall announce my killings by way of the Zodiac symbol. I like killing people because it is so much fun." He ended with a strange symbol, a crosshair, like a rifle scope. The Zodiac had a voice now, and it was taunting an entire city. The murders were soon connected to earlier attacks. Lovers shot in parked cars near Vallejo, a couple stabbed by a lake outside Napa. Each scene left behind fear and coded messages. Police began to piece together a pattern. The killer stalked couples, struck without warning, and vanished into the dark. But what terrified investigators most was his precision. He seemed to study the police responses, change locations, and write about it after. He was watching them as they watched him. By November, 3 major Bay Area newspapers had each received Zodiac's letters. Some included hand-drawn ciphers, complex puzzles made of strange symbols, letters, and circles. The killer claimed that solving them would reveal his real name. The first cipher, cracked by a local schoolteacher and his wife, read like a manifesto of madness. "I like killing because it gives me the most thrilling experience. Man is the most dangerous animal of all." It wasn't just murder. It was ego. Performance. A killer who wanted an audience. As months passed, police interviews grew desperate. Thousands of tips flooded in. Sketch artists worked around the clock. But every lead evaporated, witnesses disagreed, handwriting analysts clashed, and suspects came and went. Then, in one of the most frustrating moments in modern police history, officers Fouke and Zelms realized they might have actually seen the Zodiac Killer that night, walking calmly just blocks from the Stine murder scene. They passed him on the sidewalk. The dispatcher had said black male suspect, so they didn't stop him. That mistake would haunt them for decades. The Zodiac's next letters were more arrogant, almost gleeful. He bragged about tricking police, hinted at bombs, and even threatened to attack school buses full of children. Every newsroom in California became a fortress. Parents kept their kids home. The streets felt infected with paranoia. Then, another letter arrived, with something new. A map. Drawn over a real Bay Area grid, the Zodiac symbol marked a location near Mount Diablo. Below it, a line of code. By the way, if you want to find me, you can use this map and the code below. The map lines are key to my bomb. But the code was unsolved. And the bomb? It never went off, if it ever existed at all. Investigators began to suspect the Zodiac was more than a killer. He was an intelligence game, one man controlling the emotions of millions. Forensic analysis suggested he might be military trained. Others believed he was a local with a deep grudge. But his voice, mocking, confident, and strangely articulate, felt like someone who loved the spotlight more than the act of killing itself. He wasn't just hiding from justice. He was playing with it. Months passed. And then, silence. The killings stopped. The letters slowed. But just as police began to think it was over, a janitor cleaning out a storage locker in downtown San Francisco made a disturbing discovery. Inside a small cardboard box, neatly packed between old newspapers and maps, were dozens of envelopes, each marked with the same crosshair symbol. Some were unopened. Others were half-written drafts. One stood out, its envelope yellow, its flap still sealed. Detective Armstrong slipped on gloves, took a slow breath, and opened it. Inside was another piece of fabric, blood-stained, folded neatly around a single note that read, "This is not over." The silence after the letter didn't feel like peace, it felt like a challenge. Every newsroom in Northern California was on edge. Every detective in San Francisco had the same thought running through their minds: he's watching us. Detective Bill Armstrong sat in his office, surrounded by maps pinned with photos, dates, and red threads. He hadn't slept more than a few hours a night since the first letter arrived. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that crosshair symbol, stamped in black ink, mocking him. And somewhere out there, the man who drew it was still breathing the same air. Then came the next letter. This time, the Zodiac wrote about a bomb hidden near Mount Diablo, boasting that he could wipe out a school bus if he wanted. He included another cipher, one that no one could crack. It wasn't just a threat anymore, it was psychological warfare. Across town, journalist Paul Avery became the face of the story. Charismatic, fearless, and addicted to danger, Avery was the first reporter to call Zodiac what he truly was: a narcissistic predator craving attention. He wrote front-page headlines, dissecting every word, every symbol, every comma of the Zodiac's letters. The killer didn't appreciate that. One morning, Avery opened an envelope at his desk. Inside was a Halloween card, childish drawings of skeletons and pumpkins. But scrawled across the card in red ink were the words, "From your secret pal, I'm going to punish you." Avery froze. For the first time, the hunter felt hunted. Police placed him under constant protection, but Avery's smile never quite returned. He'd learned something the hard way. The Zodiac wasn't just killing strangers. He was choosing his audience. Meanwhile, leads multiplied, and dissolved just as quickly. One of the most promising suspects was a man named Arthur Lee Allen, a former schoolteacher with a fascination for ciphers and an unsettling interest in young people. Allen had been fired from his job for misconduct and lived alone in a cluttered home in Vallejo. When detectives searched his property, they found knives, ammunition, and a watch branded with the name Zodiac. But there was a problem. No direct evidence linked him to the murders. His handwriting didn't match. His fingerprints were inconclusive. Armstrong slammed the case file shut. "He fits everything," he said, "except the proof." And that's how it always went. Every lead, no matter how promising, ended in smoke. By early 1970, Zodiac's letters had reached a fever pitch. He demanded that his coded messages be printed on the front page of every major newspaper, or he'd start killing again. Police departments in San Francisco, Vallejo, and Napa had formed a task force, pooling resources, but their coordination was fragile. One missed detail, one miscommunication, could cost another life. At night, Armstrong often walked the streets alone, tracing the killer's routes, trying to think like him. He once told a colleague, "He's not a ghost. He's just smarter than the system. But deep down, he wasn't sure anymore. One of the most haunting moments came when a group of cryptographers contacted the police, claiming they'd found something inside Zodiac's letters. Patterns, hidden codes, maybe even coordinates. Every symbol seemed to point toward Mount Diablo, but the equations made no sense. Then one investigator noticed something chilling. Each cipher included random letters that, when aligned across several messages, formed one repeating phrase: "You won't catch me." It wasn't just arrogance. It was a prophecy. Then, the killings stopped. For nearly a year, no new letters arrived. No bodies. No sightings. Some believed Zodiac was dead or imprisoned under another name. Others thought he'd moved on, found a new hunting ground. But Armstrong couldn't shake the feeling that silence was part of the game. He knew killers like Zodiac didn't stop, they evolved. And he was right. March 1971. The Los Angeles Times received a letter postmarked from San Francisco. The return of the crosshair. "This is the Zodiac speaking. I am not dead. I am still out here. I have killed 10 people to date." Attached was another map. Another code. Another wave of fear. The letter mentioned a film, The Exorcist, calling it the best satirical comedy ever made. That was Zodiac's humor. Cold, disconnected, almost inhuman. Armstrong leaned back in his chair, staring at the words. "He's getting older," he muttered. "But the handwriting, the arrogance, it's him." Avery, now paranoid and drinking heavily, published one final article about Zodiac before leaving the city altogether. In it, he wrote, "He hides in plain sight. Maybe he's reading this right now. Maybe he's sitting next to you." That article never left Armstrong's mind. Because it felt true. In the following years, new suspects emerged: an engineer, a truck driver, a Vietnam veteran, even a former policeman. Each seemed plausible, but none fit perfectly. The FBI took over parts of the investigation, yet the case files grew thicker while the answers grew thinner. Then one evening in 1974, a janitor cleaning out the Chronicle's archive room found something taped beneath an old desk drawer, a yellowed envelope with a crosshair symbol. Inside was a short note written in faded ink. "I am waiting for a good movie about me. Then I'll write again." It was signed with a smiley face. Armstrong stared at it in disbelief. "He's mocking us," he said quietly. But the note raised a terrifying question. Was the killer still nearby, living an ordinary life, laughing at the chaos he left behind? In 1978, another letter surfaced. This one, most believed, was fake. The handwriting was close but not identical, and the tone felt off. Still, it reopened old wounds. Investigators re-examined everything: the ciphers, the evidence, the suspects. Even Alan, now older and ill, was questioned again. He denied everything, smiled, and said, "If I were Zodiac, you'd never catch me." A chilling echo of the killer's own words. By the 1980s, the case had gone cold. Detectives retired. Witnesses faded. Files collected dust. But in 1991, Armstrong, now gray-haired and weary, received one last package at his doorstep. No return address. Inside was a black-and-white photograph of San Francisco Bay, taken from Mount Diablo. On the back, scribbled in familiar handwriting, were just 3 words: "You still there?" Armstrong's hands shook. For the first time in years, he felt that old pulse of fear. He looked out his window at the skyline, wondering if somewhere in the same city, the Zodiac was still watching, older now but still playing the game. He opened the blinds, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he saw a figure across the street, motionless, standing in the fog. But when he blinked, it was gone. The older Armstrong got, the more the case began to haunt him like a half-remembered nightmare. He'd wake up at night still hearing the echo of that name, Zodiac. The sound of a typewriter, the smell of cheap ink and fear. It was supposed to be over. The killings had stopped. The world had moved on. But some ghosts don't fade. They wait. In 2002, new hope arrived in the form of modern science, DNA. San Francisco PD pulled the Zodiac letters from deep storage, still sealed in evidence bags marked "Do Not Touch." Technicians carefully swabbed the corners of the envelopes, hoping for saliva, skin cells, something. The results came back, partial DNA profiles, but no match in any criminal database. Armstrong, now retired but still consulting unofficially, stared at the report. "So he's still out there," he whispered. "Still no name. Just a shadow." The FBI began running comparisons against their main suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, but he was long dead. Heart attack, 1992. They tested his DNA against the letters. No match. For many, that was the end. But Armstrong couldn't accept it. If Allen wasn't Zodiac, then who had been playing God all those years? Across the country, amateur sleuths began forming their own digital task forces, online communities of codebreakers and retired detectives obsessed with the case. They called themselves the Cipher Hunters. Each one convinced they'd find the key to Zodiac's secrets hidden in plain sight. For decades, they dissected every letter, every word, every mistake. Then, in December 2020, a breakthrough. A group of independent cryptographers announced they had finally solved one of Zodiac's most infamous unsolved messages, the 340 cipher. The decoded message read, "I hope you are having lots of fun trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise all the sooner." No name. No confession. Just that same voice, smug, mocking, immortal. Zodiac had spoken from the past, just to remind the world he'd won. The revelation reignited Armstrong's obsession. He spent his final years chasing the patterns again: satellite maps, handwriting overlays, cross-references between murder scenes. It always circled back to one idea: control. Zodiac wanted to control the fear, the headlines, the narrative. He didn't just want to kill people, he wanted to be remembered. And that's exactly what he got. In one of his final interviews, Armstrong said something that unsettled viewers around the world. What if he stopped killing? Because he didn't have to anymore. What if fear became his masterpiece? It was a disturbing thought, that the Zodiac didn't disappear. He evolved. He became a legend people kept alive with every theory, every YouTube video, every whispered retelling. And maybe, that's what he wanted all along. But then, something unexpected happened. In 2021, a retired detective named Gary Post was named by a group called the Casebreakers as the most likely Zodiac suspect. They claimed to have photographic evidence, scars, and cryptic clues connecting him to the crimes. For a moment, the internet erupted. News outlets ran headlines proclaiming Zodiac finally identified. But official agencies disagreed. The DNA didn't match. The evidence was circumstantial. And once again, the truth dissolved into fog. It was the same endless loop: suspects, theories, denials. The Zodiac remained what he'd always been, a riddle with no final line. One rainy night, Armstrong's daughter visited his small San Francisco apartment. He was sitting by the window, staring at the skyline. On the table beside him lay a single yellowed envelope. She frowned. "Dad, what's that?" He looked at her, eyes tired but calm. "Something the mailman delivered yesterday." She picked it up. No return address. The paper looked old, the ink faint. In the center, drawn carefully in black pen, was a small symbol, the crosshair. Her voice trembled. "Dad, is this real?" He took the letter, opened it slowly. Inside was a blank sheet of paper, except for one handwritten sentence. "I told you I'd never leave." That letter was never authenticated. No fingerprints, no saliva, no proof it was from the Zodiac himself. But for Armstrong, it didn't matter. He knew the handwriting. He'd seen it 1,000 times. That night, he burned the letter in his fireplace and whispered into the smoke, "You win. But I'm still watching." He passed away 3 years later, the case still unsolved. The police files remain open to this day. In 2025, 56 years after Paul Stein's murder, the Zodiac Killer remains one of America's greatest mysteries. Over 2,500 suspects investigated. 5 confirmed victims. Dozens more possibly connected. And not a single conviction. Some believe he's long dead. Others think he's alive, older, invisible, living under a new name, watching the world talk about him. Because that's what he always wanted: attention, power, immortality through fear. And yet, every few years, a new letter surfaces. A new cipher. A new maybe. The legend of the Zodiac isn't just about murder. It's about obsession, the kind that consumes detectives, reporters, and strangers who can't stop trying to solve a puzzle written in blood and arrogance. Because the truth is, nobody wants to admit that maybe he won. So next time you walk through the quiet streets of San Francisco, look closely at the faces around you. The man beside you at the cafe, the one reading the newspaper with steady hands. He might be just another ordinary citizen. Or maybe, he's the last man still smiling behind the mask of a mystery that refuses to die. They thought the killer was gone. But then, another letter arrived. And it was signed the same way. The Zodiac.